And good evening, everyone. It is the Power Hour here at North Grove Brewers in Montague. John Russell along with my partner in crime, Mike Taylor, and I do mean crime.
And light on the partner, please.
And we are here with the legendary Joe Coletta. Joe was graceful enough to come on by and say hi to us, and he hasn't left us yet, so we'll.
Thank God.
we haven't asked the first question yet.
We've locked the doors.
That's right, yeah. No, hey, thanks for joining us on this St. Patrick's Day. Should be a lively show tonight.
Hey, we got a young crowd in here today, too. I'd say about 50% of them aren't old enough to have this green beer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Joe, let's start out kind of at the beginning for you. A Ravenna kid. You're born and raised in Ravenna?
Yeah, for sure. Born and raised there. Graduated Ravenna High School. I don't know if I want to throw dates around, but let's say it was in the 70s, late 70s.
Okay.
And played football and basketball and baseball. Back in the day when you didn't have hitting coaches and pitching coaches and travel teams, although I did play a little travel baseball. So, but yeah, I had a great. I mean, growing up in Ravenna was.
Now, was Brian Wright ahead of you? Your grade, or
1 year ahead of me?
Well, 1 year ahead of you. Okay.
Yeah.
Because he was on a couple weeks ago talking about his relationship with you in school, going through school.
He just lived around the corner from me, and I tell you what, if I had $1 for every baseball or basketball or football that we played catch with, I'd be sitting really nice, because we spent, I can't tell you how many days of the year just with each other, getting better and having a tight friendship that we still share today, which is most important.
Coach, when you look at growing up like that and having a relationship, with a couple good buddies close in the neighborhood, how much do you think that playing in the neighborhood helped you in your high school career? Just the pickup games you played in basketball, baseball, football, catch, sandlot, whatever. How much did that really help you that these kids don't get today?
Meant everything. I mean, we played from sun up to sundown, and usually I had two older brothers who were great athletes, and they never wanted me around, of course, because I was a little Joe, but I wanted to compete with them. I wanted to be with them, and so I had to show up, and I better be good, or else I wasn't going to get picked, and so the neighborhood games were just every day. I mean, in the summertime, that's what we did. We got up, we went to the park, we played wiffle ball, baseball, home run derby, basketball, you name it. We didn't lift weights, I can tell you that. Not like they do today. There was no weightlifting going on back in those days. Conditioning usually started the week of practice, and maybe you did a little running before, but yeah, it was just, I think it's where those relationships were built, and I think that carried over into our teams. Brian and I, we played on a baseball team that was pretty special in Ravenna. He probably talked about it. We made it to the state finals that year, and we just all knew each other very well, and we knew our teammates were our true teammates.
How about your parents? I mean, talk to us about your parents growing up, and the support and how they felt about athletics in your life and in theirs, being a part of their life.
Well, I'm blessed to say that they're both still alive. They're 93 years old. They still live in the same house that I grew up in. My dad still snow blows the driveway and plays golf. And my mom still yells at my dad to knock it off and get something done around the house. But they never missed a game. In fact, the only game that I know of that my dad ever missed any of us boys playing was my brother Tim, who was a really good basketball player, played at Ferris. Right. He's in our Hall of Fame for basketball, and he scored 50 one day at Ravenna. And my dad was on the school board, and just so happened they had a school board meeting that night, and he missed that game. He put up 50 points, and that was before the three-point line. And my mom, being as low-key as she is, got home, and my dad come in. Well, how'd they do? And he goes, good. Tim had 50. That's how my mom made it. They won. But it was special. I always knew where they were sitting in all the games. I knew where they were going to be. And it still amazes me to this day how, they would drive to Ferris to watch my brother play basketball and me play baseball, and how they got to work. My dad worked at Seal Power. My mom worked at Seal Power Piston Ring. How they got to work and got to Big Rapids for those games is still amazing. How they put us in a position to do those things, we didn't realize at the time the sacrifices that they were probably making for us.
Did your brother Tim, did he go on to do any type of coaching after he got out of Ferris?
He coached 1 year, one season of basketball when he was substitute teaching, went undefeated, retired.
Wow.
Got a job with Pepsi, and he moved up the chain of command at Pepsi, and they relocated him in South Carolina, and he graduated with a teaching degree, but when he couldn't find a job back in those days, that's the way it was, but he got in with Pepsi, and he moved up the company ladder there.
I bet that didn't sit well with your mom and dad having him move that far away.
No, it didn't.
At a young age.
No, it didn't. They still don't like it. He comes back a couple times a year, and I'm sure they prefer him to be home.
Yeah. Your brother Tim played on the same team that my cousins played on, Ben Lawrence.
Oh, yeah.
The Lawrence boys were over there. In fact, I remember as a kid going to some of those. I think we were up in Shelby to watch him on the road one time, and there was 3 of them at that time.
Yep.
There was Dan, Howard, and Pat. And
yeah.
And then Ben came along a little bit later and played with Tim. But
they had a whale of a team.
Yeah, that was I remember listening to those games on the radio and seeing how far they were going to go.
Yeah, they had a great team, and they got knocked off by I remember the kid got hot against them, and they couldn't stop him, and one player did it to him. But it was still, I still believe it's the best Ravenna basketball team that they've had. They've had some good ones, since, but that was a complete team with size and depth, and they were good.
And this year's Ravenna basketball team went all the way to the regionals for the first time in
a long time. Since the 40s or 50s, I think I read.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was cool.
Good for them.
I wanted to kind of tie bar back on something that Mike had mentioned about organized games and organizing a game, playing sandlot games. That is something that Mike and I talk about a little bit. We wonder if it isn't kind of missing from kids today. I mean, we're all relatively the same age, grew up kind of the same similar backgrounds with, whatever was in season you played. And like you said, very seldom could you get 9 or 8. You're never going to get 18 guys to play a complete baseball game, so you had to close the field. You had to play, called it Indian ball or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But my whole point is you kind of invented things. You organized the thing yourself, and now it seems, correct me if I'm wrong because you're closer to kids today still coaching, it seems like maybe kids wait today to have something organized for them.
Yeah.
Is that a fair judgment?
Oh, for sure. We had some pretty interesting ground rules in wiffle ball. If it hits the telephone pole above the line, it's a home run, but below it's a double. If it hits the line that goes across that connects from the house, that's a grand slam.
Right.
We came up with some creative ground rules, and that's what made it fun. My son, who's 19 now, but I'll never forget the time when, and it didn't happen very often, he and about 5 other guys got a wiffle ball game going in our backyard. And I want to tell you, it brought me to tears. It does now, even thinking about it, because you don't see it.
No.
You just don't see that.
No.
And you don't see them, getting organized and picking teams and making fair teams. It just didn't happen very much. And so when I saw that day, that was really meant a lot to me. And I told them all, I go, this is what I did. And they looked at me like, really? You did that just
What's amazing is one kid thinks of it, but to find 4 others that'll go along with it,
right.
That's
Yeah. So, yeah.
When you made that run playing baseball back in high school, and this is something that's very dear to Ravenna, to Oak Ridge, certainly the West Michigan Conference schools here, kind of the smaller schools, the whole town gets involved in that. I mean, the cafes, everybody's talking about it over their coffee, about, their kids. I mean, you guys are, and the high schools are kind of their pro teams if you look at it, or college teams, and there's just nothing like that, is there?
No, it was really special, and back then the structure of the tournament was a little bit different than it is now, where the districts where you played 2, in the regionals you played 2, and then if you made it to the state championship, you played 2. It wasn't like you had the quarterfinals on Wednesday, the semifinals on Friday, and then the championship. It was like, so you got to have 2 pitchers to go back to back if you want to get through the regional or the district or the state championship, and so that was different then. And I remember those games. We always had the first game, and then if we won, we had that gap between the championship game. And we would always, everybody that was at the game, we would go to find some picnic area, and we would go there, and they would feed us, and just the whole energy was just through the roof. And then we'd have to go back and play that finals game, but it never really seemed to bother us too much. But they'd load us on the bus, and they'd form the tunnel, and we'd get on the bus, and they'd slap us on the back, kind of like Hoosiers, and we'd go back to the field, and that was pretty special. And Ravenna and Oak Ridge are very similar in the makeup of their school districts are very, very important to the community, because that's really what the focal point is.
With your experience, Coach, in a variety of sports, how important is it, from a coaching standpoint, to have the administration and the school board be pro athletics?
It's very important,
because I've seen a lot of places it's not.
Yeah, I have too, and it just it means a lot when your high school principal comes in the locker room after the game, and win or lose, and pats you on the back, or gives you some advice or some encouragement when you need it, or the superintendent will stop by or write you a note. Those little things, they mean a lot, especially coaching, especially now more than ever with social media and everything. I mean, you can be brutal. I mean, you can really get beaten down, and you need to have that support. I know for me right now, Rick Rule, our athletic director at Oak Ridge, he's very supportive. I go to him, I'm thinking, man, this is kind of a crazy ask, but I'm going to ask him, because if I don't ask, I don't know if I'm going to get it, but I'll ask him, and he's been so supportive, and I know he's like that for everybody, and but I've seen the other side of it too, and it's hard. I mean, the coaching is hard enough. But
when you see a district like Oak Ridge, and there can be changes in coaching positions, and we don't hear a lot about the changes as superintendent, principal, assistant principal, but it seems like you always get the people in the positions that support you. Yeah. So I don't know if that's part of the interview process.
Yeah.
How do you believe in athletics kind of a thing?
100%. I just talked about that the other day, without mentioning any names, but I'm not sure today that when there's a teaching opening, administrators are going, we got to find a great teacher who can coach. That's the way it used to be, because usually your great teachers are good coaches, and vice versa. And now, I don't think that there's an emphasis on looking for that person that can fill both of those roles, because as well as I do, to have a coach in the building is so important. I mean, that's one thing now that I'm learning how to adjust to, because I retired from teaching and now I'm back coaching. So I don't see these kids in the morning after a tough loss, after a tough practice. I might have chewed somebody out at practice.
Right.
And I'd like to talk to them, and let them know that I still love them, and that, it doesn't change our relationship. And if I got to wait till practice the next day, they're going to sit home and all night, then all the next day at school, they're going to think, coach don't like me, or coach is an idiot, or worse.
Right.
So, I mean, to be there in the building, I think, is something that a lot of schools right now are struggling with. They're not looking for that teacher that can also coach. But the teacher shortage is real. I mean, that's a real thing right now, and I'm not so sure there are a lot of coaches who are getting their teaching degree. Now you're going to have to find somebody who might not be able to.
Well, it's funny. I have this conversation with a lot of people in different areas, but when we grew up, your head football coach at that time was a very respected person in the community. Okay, I mean, his opinions mattered on a wide variety of issues, and over the course of time, it's like you said, you're seeing more and more, because the changing of the guard happens so often now with coaches.
Yeah.
And who was it we were just talking about it up at Hart? I remember in a 4-year period they had 4 coaches, 4 different head coaches, and I'm like, the kids are, they suffer.
Yeah.
It's hard for them.
Yep.
And but I do remember back in the day, Dobbs' dad was the head football coach at Kalamazoo Central, and it's like, wow, it carried a lot of weight in the community.
Well, in the good old days, the football coach, he had an office in the school, and players went into that office all day long. I know Jack Sugars, players would come into his classroom all day long. And I know when I was in high school, our coach, Doug Coe, we loved him, and that's who we went to. If we didn't have our dad there, we went to our football coach.
Right.
And we were going to, we might have screwed up, and we wanted to tell him before he found out through the grapevine we screwed up. And, the kids just, it's hard to find, really. I mean, they have a football coach or any coach in the building readily available for the kids when they need them most, and I'm trying to work through that now and trying to be as much available to my girls, if they need me. So it's an adjustment, though. That's the one thing I miss about now that I'm retired. That's about the only thing. Retirement's pretty good, I'm not going to lie.
Let's back you up from the transition from high school to college. What was that like? Did you get scholarships or?
Yeah, I did. It was an eye opener. I went to Ferris, and I thought I could play 2 sports. Thought I could play football, and thought I could play baseball. And I learned real fast that was going to be a challenge, because in the fall, in the football season, there's fall baseball. So I was going to football practice, and then when I was a freshman, I would have to go to baseball practice after that for as much time as I could make it. And in the spring, that's baseball season, but spring football. So it's probably the 2 worst sports that you could do. So I did a year of that, and I had to step back and say, okay, what's going to be my best path here? I could see they're bringing in quarterbacks from Ohio and Indiana, and I'm a little guy from Ravenna. And where on baseball, I was pretty good. I was pretty competitive and made the varsity right away. And I just decided that one sport was enough, and glad I did, because I really enjoyed my baseball career at Ferris, and I wish they still had baseball there. But the transition though was, you go from a big fish in a little pond of Ravenna, and now you're competing with guys who are from much bigger schools.
Well, you must have been pretty young then when they made the switch from wooden bats, to aluminum.
We had aluminum. Yeah. It was, in fact, that was just about happening when we were in high school. I think, but like a JV player, they made that transition over to I don't think they called them composite. I think they just called them aluminum bats back then. Yeah, That was, we thought that was, and you didn't have a whole rack full. It was like one aluminum bat,
Right.
Everybody used it. Yeah. But, that was part of the transition back in the day, yeah.
At what point did you know when you went to Ferris that you were going to get into education? I mean, did you know what you wanted to do?
No, well, I did. When I got there, I thought I was going to be a commercial artist.
Oh, okay.
And I did one semester of that. And I'm looking
Found out
around.
that you weren't going to do that.
I'm looking around at some of the stuff I'm doing and some of the stuff these other people are doing. I'm going, man, this is crap. I'm putting together here. In high school, I thought I was a pretty good artist. I like to do sketches, and I still kind of mess around with it, but it just didn't feel right. It just didn't feel like something that was going to take me where I wanted to go. And so after the first semester, I switched into education, and the rest is history on that. It was a good move.
Did you know what you wanted to teach once you made that move? Was there a subject that you
Well, the degree that I ended up getting was like an administrative / teaching degree. It was called Community Education Director. So when I graduated, I got into administration. I kind of did things in reverse order. I was a community ed director for 10 years right out of college. And then I went from that to middle school principal for 5 years and saw that whole end of it. But I was still coaching, trying to during that time.
Where was this? Was this at Oak Ridge?
Well,
or was that before Oak Ridge?
at Ravenna,
Okay.
out of college. I did it 5 years at Ravenna. And spent 1 year with Dusty on his staff there.
You probably got some stories from those days, don't you?
Yeah.
Any that you could tell?
Probably not. Probably not. But then, I was still, when I graduated from Ferris, so that's when Jack got me in. I was doing substitute teaching my first 2 years, and I was a JV football coach at Oak Ridge. But then Ravenna hired me to be the community ed director, and they wanted me there. They didn't want me coaching at Oak Ridge anymore, and they wanted me, because it was a new program we were starting up, and they wanted me to, be fully invested. So I couldn't debate that. But eventually, I found my way back to Oak Ridge. Jack didn't let me go for too long, and Oak Ridge started their own community ed program, and they asked me if I wanted to be the lead on that, and I said sure, I'd do that. And that's when I went to Oak Ridge, and at that point, that's when I took the offensive coordinator job with Jack, and was community ed director. And then when I moved into the middle school principal position, they really weren't gung-ho on me coaching. And I was single at the time. I said, all I got to do is come to work and coach football. I don't have a wife or kids or anything, and I'm going to be able to do both. And so I convinced them that I could do both, and I did do both. And
That's great. That's good stuff right there.
Exactly.
So that
I knew a marriage would tear me down too.
Yeah. When I was principal, that's when I got married toward the latter stages of my administrative career. Normally you teach, then you go to administration. I did backwards, which I think it was more beneficial for me as a teacher to do it that way, because I saw the BS that administrators got to deal with. And many a times I would say when I was a principal, you're really sending this kid to me when you could deal with this on your own. And so it made me pause when I was teaching and says, is this something that I can deal with, or is this something that I need to send to the office and let the administrator? So, it was good.
I've never heard of anybody else doing what you did.
Yeah.
Really?
Never. I've never heard of anybody going into administration first,
Yeah.
then moving into teaching.
Well, I tell you, I had some great mentors. Okay, and I never would have made it if it wouldn't have been for Gene Young. God rest his soul.
Right.
He took me under. He was a community ed director at Fruitport, and my first day on the job, the superintendent of Ravenna, he gave me this piece of paper with a name. It said Gene Young, phone number. He said, call him. So I call him up, and Gene. Yo, Coletta, get your ass over here. So I go over there, and he lays it out for me. Okay, this is what you got to do. Boom, 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 boom. And he just took me under his wing, and that's how my relationship with Gene Young started.
Right.
And then, of course, Jack was my other mentor.
Sure. What else can you say with that?
It's pretty. I was pretty lucky. I mean, I just lucked out, and those guys kind of steered me in the administrative path, and Jack took care of me in the coaching path. And I had always had a passion for sports. Obviously, but I just I was just lucky. Lucky that those guys came into my life, and then my wife came in my life, and just kind of everything fell together.
I want to take you back just to that short time you worked with Dusty, and I'm going to ask you a question. I'm sure the answer is no, but could you even, obviously you're seeing Dusty as a young man. I mean, he's just starting out his business. His dad was in the backfield with Earl Morrill over at the Big Reds. He went to Puffer, so he comes over. I can only imagine what a young Dusty must be like, because he was intense as he got through the year. Was he always that intense, or what was that like? Could you foresee the career that he was going to have as far as a coach? Was there something in there that you saw?
Well, you got to understand, I knew Dusty before he became Dusty.
Okay.
He and I played high school baseball in the summer together. We were on 2 state championship Connie Mack teams. And quick story about Dusty. This is a good one.
Okay.
The name of our team was the Fraternal Order of Police. Okay, they sponsored our Connie Mack team. So we're in Dearborn, Michigan, playing the state championship game. Dusty's he's the leader of our team. I mean, he was the leader then, like he always has been. So he got the great idea, let's hitchhike into Detroit. Bunch of guys.
What a leader.
High school. Yeah. Let's get on a bus and go see what we can get into. Well, we got into Detroit, but we never factored in getting back to Dearborn. So the only thing that saved us was we had our Fraternal Order of Police jackets on.
Okay.
And this is like 2 a.m. This is after we won the state championship. And our coaches were police officers in Muskegon. And Dusty goes, let's go to this coffee shop over there. There's always cops over there. They'll get us back. Sure enough, we go in there, there's cops. We got our Fraternal Order of Police jacket. He tells them the story. We just won the state championship. We're out celebrating, and we're a long way from our hotel, and we don't know how to get there. Can you help us? Oh, sure. They call a couple of their buddies of their squad cars. They drive us back to the hotel, slap us on the back, and say, good job, man. So that's a leadership story on Dusty. But, when Dusty went to Central, I was at Ferris, and we spent some time at each other's places in college. So he and I went back a ways. And so I still take credit for him landing in Ravenna. When I was working there, and I called him up, and I said, we got a head football coaching position open, and I think it'd be perfect for you. He was coaching in Texas at the time. Copper's Cove, I think it was. And he applied, and I put a good word in for him because they didn't really know him. And he got the job, and the rest is history at Ravenna.
When you look at Dusty and some of the things he accomplished, did he ever say anything, Coach, about maybe looking to move to a bigger high school, or taking another step to a bigger place, or?
Not really.
Was he?
He coached at Muskegon for a year or two before he went to Texas. I forget the head coach at Muskegon at that time. He didn't stay very long, but I think that's how he ended up he followed him to Texas, now that I think about it. But he never really expressed any desire to be a big-time coach. Even when he was having success, I remember the talk when jobs would coming up and his name would come out. But he and I, we talked all the time when he lived in Ravenna, and we talked all the time. And he never really said, I'd like to be a big-time high school football coach or go college. He was ingrained in Ravenna's fiber when he was there. I mean, people loved him. Most people loved him. There's some that, he was a strong personality, and, so be it. But for the most part, he was beloved in Ravenna. He did, look what he did there for that town. And,
right.
But yeah, his leadership was, he can get a kid to do things that a lot of people can't. Average kids, he can make them great.
Right.
And that's I think a true testament.
Well, and again, you look at guys like Dusty and their coaching style.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know today. It's a whole different. It's a whole different student athlete we're talking about today. That the motivation that you use for kids today versus what you could do back in 1985 and 90 and
I think that's kind of what eventually got to him a little bit. He just got tired of the way things were going and the direction it was heading. When he took that time away, then came back.
Right.
I think he saw that that it changed a little bit when he was away for a while, and because when he stepped away the second time, Ravenna was doing pretty well in football. Dave Smith came in, and he kind of took what Dusty left him and did pretty well with it.
Right.
So, but yeah, he was ready to get out. My dad was kind of upset that he left because he's a Ravenna guy, and he always asked me, "Do you think Dusty ever come back?" He still asks me to this day, "Do you think Dusty ever come back?" "Nope, Dad, he ain't coming back."
And you go, "As what?"
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
He'll come back for dog days every summer.
Yeah. Well, you guys had, and one more little thing on Dusty, and then we'll get back to where you're at. But that rivalry that you had at Oak Ridge with Ravenna, I mean, it was the West Michigan Conference. It was a battle.
Yeah.
How did you, as obviously you're friends with Dusty.
Yeah.
But you both want to win.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Is there calls during that week of some good-natured ragging on, or was it strictly business and hey, we're doing our thing, they're doing their thing? How did that all work out?
We always talked Thursday night before every game, and the conversation was a little bit shorter the night before we played.
Right.
But we always talked about how the week went and how the JV games went and just what's going on. And when you have a conversation with Dusty, it's not a short one. Okay, and he's going to lead it pretty much most. So I just would step back and he'd give me a lot of information, and I didn't have to really pry. And so I just sat back and listen and. And then we get on game night when Ravenna Oak Ridge played. It was small talk, but we would always, this just now it stands out. But we'd stand at the 50-yard line and look around, and then you go, "You ever think we'd be doing this back when we were in high school, coaching in a game like this? With this type of crowd and this type of atmosphere?" And he's right. I didn't really envision myself in that type of position back then, and we just were thankful, we were able to do that. So
when you're on board now at Oak Ridge, we're working with Jack.
Yeah.
You handled the offense, right? Is
Correct.
that how that worked out?
Yeah.
Is that what, did he come to you and said, "Hey, I want you to handle my offense"?
He did.
I guess, how did he delegate with his coaches? I tend to think that he did a lot of delegation. He let guys kind of do what they could do, and obviously made the suggestions. He's a coach, but kind of let you guys do what you had to do, right?
Yeah. Well, when I first started there was 2 coaches on the JVs and 2 coaches on the varsity. One of the coaches, like I was the head JV coach, I did the offense, and the other guy did the defense. He was the line coach. I did running backs. The other, same thing in the varsity. Jack was the head coach, and Barney Goodrich was his assistant when I first got there. And that. But now you look at staff; they got like 10 guys on their staff, and I tell these guys, "You guys don't know how good you got it." But it grew, over time. But where our staff would grow was former players would come back. So when he asked me to do the offense, and Jack did call the offense prior to that. He just stepped away from that. He did the defense, and then he brought Mark Jolovec in to help with the defense. And Kerry Harger was the offensive defensive line coach. And then Tim Parker came in, former player. And then Dave Randall came in, and then the old guys would graduate, go to school, or get a job or whatever, and they would just keep coming back. They want to give back, and the staff just kept growing with former players. Yeah. The only outsiders was like me and Mark Jolovec. and everyone else was Oak Ridge guys.
Right.
And which is kind of cool, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do with the softball program, to be honest with you. But he had guys coming back who invested and loved Oak Ridge football, and they would do anything for Jack. And so that was kind of nice that when you get more people, they can delegate a little bit better. And
Right.
so yeah, that's.
Yeah, I know what you mean about the staffs. I looked at guys like Dan Roan.
Yeah.
You got 74 coaches
Yeah.
and 52 kids playing.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah. I know.
E-,
Each kid had their own coach.
yeah, yeah. The ratio it was 2 coaches per athlete.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different world now, and with they delegate things out and they give them titles that I don't know how they come up with these titles, but or what they do or what they mean, but it seems to work pretty well for Dan.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
As you got, when did Jack really? I mean, he's known famously now for special teams and working
Yeah.
with kickers and punters, and that being was he always like that? Because football at the high school level, I mean, usually it kind of stuck a lineman in there and he kicked
Yeah.
straight on, and maybe he made it, maybe he didn't. I
Yeah.
mean, football, there was a point where it really did change, and your specialists became guys that were going to win you football games.
Well, Jack's a great student of the game. I mean, he's the poster child for student of the game of football because he didn't play it,
Right.
self-taught, and he just was a sponge for knowledge, And I can remember, when we had an exchange student come to Oak Ridge. We had already started practice, and this exchange student from Denmark. His parents come in and said he wants to play football, and Jack goes, okay. And he's a pretty good soccer player, that Mom said. He goes, well, maybe he can kick field goals and extra points and whatnot. So this tells you how far Jack's special teams expertise is. So we go out to the field, and he brings the ball on the tee, and the kids struggle with the English language a little bit. So Jack yells, kick ball through upright. And I go, Jack, he's not deaf. He just doesn't understand English. That was his kicking critique. Kick ball. So he's really, but then he'd have a camp every summer, kicking camp, and he'd bring in some like Jason Hansen would come in, and I think that's when that whole thing with him and special teams started. He started to really take an interest, and I think he really understood the importance of it. I mean, most high schools, even unless you're Dan Ronstadt, where you can dedicate someone to that. Special teams, I mean, we all talk about it's 1/3 of the game, but I don't know that everybody dedicates 1/3 of their commitment to it the way that they should or that they talk about. But he realized that, and he just now he's doing these camps all over, and he's got some very knowledgeable people coming in to kind of do it. He's learned that way, and at Ferris he studies film like he's like a film guru. He breaks down film better than anybody I know, and because he just works at it, and he's told me, when the Ferris was going through their playoff run, he's got 12 games he's got to break down on Valdosta. Every punt snap, every kickoff. I go, that sounds like fun. But he loves to do it, and he's good at it. So,
we talked a little bit before we went on about we'd have an opportunity to come visit you guys in the locker room a little bit after the game, say hey to Jack or whatever. And I was always impressed by how there didn't seem to be any decompression. I mean, it seemed like, you guys, all the coaches you already had back then it was VHS tape and all that stuff. You were kind of you were kind of figuring out getting what you could get from that game and what you were going to work on. I mean, you guys were, the game wasn't even over, and you guys were getting ready to dissect that game and get ready for next week, weren't you?
Well, yeah, because we were probably one of the few staffs that had our staff meetings Saturday morning. I mean, we go from Friday night, and we're going in Saturday morning at 8 o'clock at our staff meeting for the weekend. And we do that till till we're done, 1 o'clock or whatever. So, we had to have things ready to go, and Jack always was big on, he wanted our game recorded. That's why he developed this, a stack of 8 VCRs.
Right.
And he'd have one master, and then it would make 8 copies so he could give the kids their tape before they left the locker room from Friday night. That was back when they hung around the locker room and maybe showered. Now they don't even shower. They're out of there. But, yeah, that tells you how far. I mean, then we advanced to the DVD. Well, I remember when they used to have to take the reel to the drugstore to get it developed. That was when I first arrived on the scene there. But that was a well-oiled machine for sure, and it was a grind. I always said that from the time the game ended Friday night to Saturday night, kind of relax a little bit and not think about your next opponent, but that switch went on sometime late Saturday, that Sunday was, we got to get ready.
How has scouting football helped you in scouting for softball? I mean, compare them, and how do you handle that?
I use a lot of the same principles in softball from practice plans to scouting to the way we set up our drills. A lot of that I use the same principles. We don't film as much as we did in football, but it's starting to become more and more prevalent. I know when we get into the tournament and we want to see a team, we'll have somebody go film it. Now they got those little GoPros that they put right on the backstop, and you can see everything. So, but it's a lot of the same principles from football. I'm following Jack's blueprint in softball, and it's a great blueprint.
And let's while you're on the subject here of talking about scouting, how do the kids handle today, or their parents handle, discipline and structure, within a team concept? I mean, do you see, because so many kids today, Coach, come from a broken home.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There might not be a father figure in the house, for who knows why, but there's a lot of situations that these kids bring into the school and that are playing athletics. And, how do you overcome those barriers, when you look individually at each player in your team?
Yeah.
Okay, and I know this athlete can't handle, the kind of pressure I really want to give them.
Well, I think it starts with the relationships that you build with your players. And that's another thing that I learned from Jack, is that until you establish that rapport and that relationship with your kids, they're not going to buy in. They're not going to trust you enough to really allow you to do what you want to do. So for me, and I encourage a lot of young coaches, that forget about the X's and O's. Forget about what you know. What's most important is what you know about your players. Do they come from broken homes? Do they need something that they're not getting at home? Do they play outside sports outside of what you coach? And are you encouraging them in that area too? Or are you just their softball coach and you don't care about anything else that they do? Because if you're just caring about your particular sport, you have no interest in them outside of that, you're going to fail miserably in building a relationship, in my opinion. That's something that's, being away from softball for a couple of years, I really had to play catch up and get to know these girls. And I couldn't do it during the school day anymore, so I had to play catch up and do things to try to get to know them better and connect, and so that when we started the season, I wasn't going to be a stranger to them. Because that to me is most important. Is they got to be able to look at you and say, I believe in you and I trust you, and what you're telling me, you got my best interest in mind. And until you can establish that rapport and that respect, they don't care what you know, or what you've done, or any championships you've won. I mean, that doesn't. Kids today want to know that you care. They want to know that you're going to be there and that you can stand behind them when they need it. And then, of course, the relationship with mom and dad will probably will depend on what type of relationship you have with their kid. I mean, if it's a good one, the kids are going to go home and say, yeah, coach is pretty cool, or coach is a jerk, and mom and dad are going to go, oh, really? They might not like to hear that. But so I think the relationship with the parents stems a lot from the relationship with the player. But then there are parents that you'll never connect with. I get that, and they have a whole different opinion of where their kids should be or where they should go play at the next level. And I mean, all you can try to do is educate them on what it's really like at the next level. But it happens everywhere. Mom and dad think that their kids should be a D1 player, and I'm sorry to tell you that, but if they play junior college, that would be awesome.
I have to tell you, you say that. My son graduated 3 years ago from Montague, and he played basketball, and he was never a starter. But I remember hearing some of the parents, Coach, talking about how their son was going to be able to play college ball and all this, and I'm like, okay. And so at the parent meeting, at the end of the parent meeting, and there were a lot of parents in this room, does anybody have any questions? And I raised my hand, and yeah, Mike. And I said, just before we start the season, I need to know, for me personally, do you see my son being first team or second team All-State this year? And the coach looked at me, knowing my son's not even a starter. He goes, I definitely see him as second team.
That's awesome.
And I thought, and all those parents just kind of looked at me, and afterwards they came up, what are you doing? I said, I just want you to know, let's just keep it real.
Yeah.
Let the kids play high school ball. Don't look beyond it. Let's just, it's ridiculous.
I've come up with a pretty good solution to the parent who just is not in touch with reality. And it works for me at Oak Ridge, arguably the two greatest male and female athletes at Oak Ridge have been Jamie Potts and Sophia Wired. Okay? And whenever mom or dad or anybody says, my kid's going D1, going to go D1, I go, listen, is your daughter better than Sophia Wired? And they'll go, well, no. Well, then what makes you think she's going D1? Or is she better than Jamie Potts? Jamie Potts went D2 at Grand Valley. And they kind of stop and they think, well,
right.
So that puts it in perspective that, those are the elite, the best of the best. And, but it's worked for me a couple of times that I think it's really put it in perspective for parents.
Well, and those athletes you're comparing them to are young enough that these parents,
right,
and
right.
They know who they are.
And if they walk through the halls at Oak Ridge, they see their pictures and their stats and everything, their accomplishments and their names on the wall, and so yeah, it's an eye opener, and so.
On the football field, you guys, and on the softball field, you've done a lot of winning. And I'm going to start out with football end of things. The thing that always impressed me from an announcer standpoint, and I announced other leagues, and there would be crossover games with you guys.
Yeah.
And I would talk with coaches from that other league, and they would have nice years. But it was like they won their conference championship, and the playoffs were kind of icing on the cake. It's great just to be here. You guys never really had that mentality.
No.
I mean, you never took your foot off the accelerator, did you?
No, it was kind of a monster that was being created. You know, after you've done, you know, you get over that first hump of making the playoffs. Okay, that was always the goal, make the playoffs.
Yeah.
And then you get beat in the playoffs, and well, that's not good enough anymore. You know, now we want to win at the playoffs. And then we had that special group that was really good, and they got us to the Silverdome for the state championship in 1990. And just our luck, we were going up against DePorres, St. Martin DePorres,
Right.
like 8 Division I kids on it. But we hung in there, and you know, I remember when the bus was pulling out the next morning, and Jack stood up, and we were driving by the Silverdome, and he goes, "Look out that window, man. We'll be back." You know, the kids were just like, "We'll be back," and that carried over, and proved to, you know, a small kid from Oak Ridge that it is possible.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that, you know, Ravenna really kind of, well, Muskegon Catholic and Muskegon kind of got that ball rolling, but Ravenna was really the first small school, public school that made that leap to the Silverdome. And I think a lot of schools went, you know what? It is possible for a small school to do it. And then shortly thereafter, that's when we went. And then once you get that taste, you know, as a coach, if you're any type of coach, you want to get back, and you want to figure out what you got to do to get back. And one of the things I realized that I got to do when I started going to clinics, I noticed that in the front row, 8 o'clock in the morning, was all the coaches who win state championships. And I wasn't one of them. I was the guy coming in with a headache from the night before, and you know, it just occurred to me, well, there's a reason John Harrington and Al Fracassa and those guys are up there in front 8 o'clock Saturday morning, because they want to get back to the state championship game. And so I started sitting with them, and then we started visiting them, and you know, it's just pretty cool.
How about a bucket list for Joe Coletta? What are we looking at here the next 10 years, 15 years? What do we got on the bucket list?
Well, you know, I got back into softball for a reason. One, I still feel like I can make a difference in kids' lives. Number 2, I like to compete still, okay? But number 3, you know, I want to win a state championship. I'm not afraid to say it, because that was one of the things that in football we finally said it, you know, and we verbalized it, and it wasn't like we were afraid to say it. And I want to. That's something that I really want to do. I want to get to the state championship, Final Four, with this program. And you know, while I still got good health, I can work hard at it, and I got great people with me, you know, helping me, you know, Red Pastor, and I've got some former players, all-state players who played college softball, who are now coming back to help me in that same style that Jack used to have, and so that's kind of in the back of my mind right now.
You're focused.
Yeah.
You're locked in on this one.
I am, and until my wife says she's still teaching, so when she says she's done teaching, we're going to Florida, then I guess I'm probably going to be done with that dream. But until then, I'm going to do everything that I can think of to help these girls do something like that.
How did softball come to be for you as far as the coach? Is that totally after your days were done as a football coach?
Yeah, well, I did it 2 years back in 1982 when I got out of college, just for extra cash, because Barney Goodrich said, I got a softball job here and nobody wants it, and you know, it pays a couple bucks. So I said, why not? You know, I took it then, and I did that for 2 years, and then went to Ravenna, took that job, and then I got back into it in 2009. It was a couple years that I retired from football in 2005 after the state championship. And it was kind of a similar situation. Program wasn't very good, but they had some really nice girls. I had them in class. a couple of really good athletes, and they asked me if I wanted to coach because they heard that I coached in '82, and I said, you know what, I got nothing else going on right now. I'm available, and I still kind of, the softball is a faster game, and yeah, why not? I'll do it for a year or two, and somebody else comes along and they can take it over. Well, here I am. It got into my blood, and we started to have success. And it was kind of the same thing as football. We had that one special group that kind of lit the fire, and they made it to the quarterfinals. Won a district, won a regional, got to the quarterfinals, and really were close. And they kind of got us over that hump. And that was like Morgan Ginning's group.
Yes.
And now I'm her assistant coach, by the way, in basketball, but which is kind of cool.
Right.
But when we got to that fire, it just kind of lit us a spark, and it was fun. And I liked being in that level of competition. I like to compete at a high level. And so I said, you know what? That's where we want to go back. And we've been kind of going down that road a lot, getting closer, and we've had a couple of nemesis along the way, have stood in our way, but they're on our schedule this year. We're going to play them. We're going to play them. I figure might as well play them during the regular season, and it's the only way you're going to get over that hump is to play those type of people on a regular basis.
Right.
So,
right.
Oak Ridge has always been, and I think I talked to Jack about this. I mean, there are kids that are going to go to college after Oak Ridge, but by and large, I think Jack said it was kind of a lunch bucket school.
Yeah.
A lot of times the kids after graduation, they're going to go in the service or they're going to go right into the workforce.
Yeah.
And they really take, boys or girls, they really kind of take that lunch bucket mentality with them from the athletic field right into their lives after school, don't they?
Yeah, I really do. And I'm really proud that since I've been coaching the softball, that we've had an academic all-state team every single year for 13 years. I've had 13 players play college softball. Those two things right there, just, I mean, the softball was a means for them to go to college.
Right.
And I still got 4 girls playing college softball right now, and I still count Sophia as a softball player, even though she's playing basketball. Although she could walk on at Toledo right now and start at shortstop and bat third in their lineup, and I know that for a fact.
Do the girls softball, is there a good feeder programs in place, Coach?
Pretty good, yeah.
Is it?
My assistant, Red Pastor, who's been, with me since I've been doing this, he's really active in the youth leagues, and he's really, really active he has a travel organization as well. So he commits a lot of his energy to softball in the Oak Ridge community. And then we have a JV team. A lot of schools don't have JV softball anymore. I mean, there's only 4 schools in our conference that have JV softball. And I just learned the other day another school that not a conference school, but a school that we played isn't going to have JV softball in the area. So it's struggling in some places because it's a specialized sport in some ways. The pitching part of it is pretty specialized, and if you don't have a pitcher, you're not going to compete. I mean, it's as simple as that. You got to have probably a couple of them. So, in order to be good at it, you got to really play a lot, and you got to pitch a lot, and you got to get lessons and invest. But the feeder program has been, the backbone really. A lot of girls, they call it the Ponytail League in Oak Ridge, and a lot of girls play it, and you can tell, the girls that play it.
It sounds like the parents back it.
Oh yeah.
That's
Oak Ridge community. The youth football, the youth baseball, they really support that stuff out there.
If it holds there, let's go.
Yeah.
Grass on the field, play ball.
Yeah. Yep.
We've only got a couple of minutes left. So I told you this is going to fly by, Joe.
Yeah.
I'll ask a question, and then Mike can finish it up with a question here. But my final question for you, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, where you know, the days of Jack Sugars, Joe Coletta, although you're back coaching now, Dusty Fairfield, Mike Holmes, the 20-year or so coach. We don't see that so much anymore, and I'm afraid that might be a thing of the past. And what are I know we only got a couple of minutes left, so that's a pretty deep question, but as a thumbnail, what are the reasons just the demands on coaches now?
I have a strong opinion on that. I think young coaches today aren't willing to commit any amount of time if they don't have success right away. If they get into a place and they don't win, they're moving on. Or if they win a couple years and have success, they're moving on to a bigger and better job. You don't find coaches that are going to put down roots in a small town, Oak Ridge or Ravenna, and think that that's a great thing. They're looking to climb, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but it's not good for the small schools. That's why you're not going to. Jack Sugars could have picked his school if he wanted to, and any school in the state of Michigan would have loved to have had him. Dusty the same way, but they chose to invest in that community, and they're legends. In the state of Michigan, they're coaching legends for football.
I'll tell you what, that's interesting to hear you say that, because I think it's so profound, okay? And you invest in the community and the kids, and I just don't know if a lot of people today get that.
No.
And I don't know if it's called loyalty or commitment to loyalty.
Yeah.
But no, that's good stuff. I hear you say that, and I'm like, damn, I wish he'd have been a superintendent.
That's one job I wouldn't want to have. No way. No way.
Well, Joe, thanks for taking some time with us here. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You are in that hall of legends as well. I know you're too humble to say that, but you've touched a lot of people's lives, and you know that. And I don't have to tell you that, but it's always a pleasure chatting with you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
And I'll tell you, as a coach, you've outkicked your coverage. You had a great career, and I'm glad it's still going.
Well, appreciate it. I'm excited to be back. Softball, first game is the 29th, and hopefully we get it in. The weather's been great so far, and girls are chomping at the bit to play. I know that, so I'm happy to be back.
Well, stay healthy.
You bet.
For sure.
Take care. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, guys.
That's going to do it for us here on the Power Hour. We want to thank our producer tonight, Matt Carquette, the Tarkinator, helping us out here as well. And it's been a pleasure working with you, Michael.
Absolutely. Great time. Coach, thank you for being a guest on this week's show.
Appreciate it.
It's going to do it from us. We're going to wrap it up from here at North Grove Brewers in Montague. You've been listening and watching the Power Hour. Good night, everybody.